Hi YouTube, Engineer Boy 100 here. Today I'm doing another video, and this time it is on how to remove and replace the water pump and the thermostat on a 2003 911 Turbo X50. This video was supposed to be the only video, but if you look through my thread you'll find there are about 4 or 5 other videos where you see this yellow shirt, and those videos are related to this video. The fuel filter video, the coolant flange water socket pipe video, and the bumper cover remover video, and how do you remove your exhaust. So if you want to see those, check those out. But this one is on how to change your water pump and your thermostat. So stay tuned. Okay, we're going to do 4 things today. We're going to remove this rear bumper, we're going to remove the exhaust, and we're going to remove and replace the water pump, and remove and replace the thermostat. We're going to jack up the vehicle so that it's easier for me to view, film, and access some of the screws on the bumper, and of course the water pump and the thermostat. The first thing we're going to do is raise up the vehicle. I've made these nice little ramps to take a car like the Turbo and raise it up high enough to make access to the underside easy with a jack. These little ramps I made are about 11 inches wide and 30 inches long. By putting the ramps under the wheels, you can just drive up on these very easily, and it makes the car high enough to get a jack under it. Okay, it's time to take off the serpentine belt. I strongly recommend that if you do that, you take some pictures and maybe draw a map of it first. If you're too lazy to draw it and you trust me, I'll put a still up of my drawing. I drew it and I'll put it up. And you can go by that, or you can draw your own. And take some pictures. So here is the tensioner release. This is a 15 millimeter. You just crank that and release the tension on the belt and take the serpentine belt off. So that's what I'll be doing next. Alright guys, I'm getting ready to take the water pump out. I wanted to show you this really cool tool here that I'm going to use, and I've been using. I saved one bolt to show you guys. This is a manual impact wrench. It is a manual impact wrench, and this little guy will save you from stripping the heads off of these bolts that are stuck or that are fragile. And the way it works is you put it in the bolt like this, a stuck bolt. You put it in there, and then let me get this over here so we can see the whole tool. Okay, and then you turn this. See, this goes. It has a cammed internal plate, and you turn this whichever way you want to turn the screw on or off till it clicks like that. Then you hit it while applying pressure. So you apply pressure and have a non-marring hammer here. Apply pressure as this bolt is stuck, and when you hit it, it twists internally and takes the bolt loose, and then it comes out just like that. Because as you hit it and the inward force goes, it turns so that there's much more contact force so it doesn't strip. Invaluable tool. Alright, so now I'm just going to go ahead and finish taking the pump all the way off. And start prepping the surface and get the gasket ready. And I know there's probably going to be some controversy about me using gasket sealer. Now here's another piece. You're going to want to note where these come out because they're not all the same length. Okay, this longer one came out from right here. Okay, and I think the other longer one is across from it. But I'll just check as I'm going along. But I know this one's shorter. I think there's only two long ones. I think they're across from each other. So let's see what we have here. See, there's another short one. And cue music. There we go. What do we have here? The one there is another short one. See, I think there's only two long ones, and I think this is it right here. I think this is the other long one. I don't know if you guys can see over there. Let me see what am I showing? This one, I think, is the other long one, and it is. Ta-da! So this right here, those are the two long ones, and I think these last two are short. So let me, you know what? I don't think I popped that one loose on the bottom. So let me get the trusty tool here. Excuse me. Put it in there. Yeah, that's not loose. So we'll just tap it. It's loose now. Take that loose. Let's see if that's a long one or short. It's another short one. And comes out real easy when you have all this room to work. Now, a couple people told me you don't have to take the bumper off. You don't have to take these off. You just loosen it and pry it back. And that's true. You can. But this is a lot easier, and I don't want to be snaking it out. And I just wanted to show everybody. I wanted to be a nice clear view. And I wanted to see up in here. Look at that, nice and clean. See. Oh yay, my pedals aren't broken. So this guy is going bye-bye. And see what. Yeah, it's a little noisy. It ain't bad. It's not bad at all. It's really not bad at all. Probably could reuse this gasket, but because I'm going to use gasket sealer anyway. So I'm just glad these aren't busted. There's nothing in there. I'm putting the new one on. I'm just happy as I can be. I can't even tell you. This is a really nice gasket that's, but you're not supposed to reuse them. You're supposed to reuse them. But I am going to use gasket sealer anyway. And I don't care who don't like it. I've been doing it for a long time and it works for me, so I'm putting it on there. You don't need it if everything's perfect. Every surface is flat, nothing's wrong. Well, you have no guarantee that I'm not about to put this thing back together on the premise of, oh, everything's perfect, it shouldn't leak. Not going to happen. I'm putting a good amount. Now, I'm not going to put so much that I get squeezed out inside of here. No. I don't want to get squeezed out in there and get stuff running through the engine block. You just put a really thin film so it takes up small voids and seals so you don't get leaks. Alright, that's enough of that rambling. Okay, so let's do a little comparison of the old and the new. Now, no, my water pump, like I said earlier, didn't fail. So listen to this. Oops. Oh. Hear that? Okay, that bearing does not sound good. Listen to the new one. Okay, see? That's why I'm changing it. Look at that. I wanted to point out one other little minor detail, or major detail. If you look at the used one, it was leaking. You can see coolant crystallized all over the outside there. So it had already started to fail. So I'm even more glad that I decided to change it. Okay, so we got the water pump off. Now we need to take off the housing for the thermostat and change the thermostat and its gasket. I'll show you where it is. It's right up here above where the water pump was, and it has 3 bolts on it. So it's right here, and there's 3 bolts. 1, 2, and 3. Way over there on the left-hand side. You can barely see it on the edge here. That is the 3rd bolt. So I have to take those 3 off and then change the thermostat. Okay, so here's a quick add-in on how to install the thermostat. Okay, first of all, getting this thermostat housing out, the fitting that goes in to the actually, I guess this is the inlet. Yeah, this would be the inlet, and the thermostat would open here. It's under suction, so it's hard to pull out. Once you take the little wire clip off, it's hard to pull this out because it's under suction. Okay, so what I did was I put some penetrant oil around here to make the O-ring slide more easily, and I popped it out. Okay, so now we're going to install the new thermostat, and I have the new gasket here, and I'm going to install the gasket with my favorite, the ultra gray gasket maker. Okay, I put this on just about everything. Now the people that say don't put it on, you don't want to get, gasket maker inside, I understand that. The way you resolve that issue is you don't put a whole lot. It doesn't require a whole lot. It squeezes out anyway. You just want to make sure you do a really careful job of putting it on nice and even. Okay, you want to put it on even, and you don't want there to be a bunch of excess to squeeze out into your engine, your block. Okay, and you just want to keep it nice and smooth, and you don't need a whole lot of excess. It doesn't help. Putting a whole lot, it doesn't do a better sealing job. It doesn't. It just squeezes out anyway. It's more important to take your time and make sure it's evenly applied than to just put a whole gob of it. Sometimes putting a whole gob is what causes the leaks because it creates gaps. So this is how I apply it, and I have never had a leak after an installation. And a tiny little bit that gets inside, you just wipe it out. Take your time and keep your eye on it. Make sure there's none inside. And it's so thin, it's not going to squeeze into the engine. Okay, I usually put it on both sides. I'll put a little bit on the housing, and that's another thing. They say, "Well, never put it on the engine." Never put. Well, that's because people are careless, and they'll end up putting a bunch, like a big glob, and they'll get a bunch that goes inside. There's no problem putting it on the engine block or the head or any part of the engine. It's just the fact that people are careless, and it's easier just to tell them not to do it than to explain that the real key is to do it thin. Now, another reason you want to do it really thin is these, especially these metal gaskets, they are coated with a sealer that seals to the metal once it heats up. So if you put a nice thin coat and you install while it's still wet, the silicone that I'm putting on will push away at the contact points, and you'll still get the sealing benefit of the coating on the gasket. In addition to any minor voids you might have, you'll get the sealing benefit of the silicone gasket maker itself. So I do thin layers like that, and I'm going to also put a thin layer on the engine so that they all made up. I put it on wet, and then I will tighten the screws up, and I will not have any leaks. So let's go over to the car and coat that surface. Okay. Thermostat housing is right here. Okay, I'm going to be putting gasket on this surface going right around here. So you probably won't be able to see once I start doing it. I'll be in the way. But I just put a thin coat around the perimeter here. And I make sure I don't get any inside. Make sure it's nice and even. You just take your time, check. It's worth the little extra 2 seconds it takes to be careful and not get it all inside and not put too much. You don't need to put a whole lot. This needs to be even. So now I can install the thermostat. Now, when installing the thermostat, there is an O-ring on the end of the pipe. I put a little bit of grease on the pipe itself. You can see it right here, and I put a little bit of grease around the inside here so that it slips in easy once I go to put the pipe on the hose. Let me see if I can get this in here. I think I'm going to try to come up from the bottom. You may be able to see a little better that way. And you may have noticed that I had the inside bolt already installed because it's tight to try and get that in after the fact. And then I do this one. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm trying to stay out of the way of the camera. It's tricky to get it done and stay out of the way of the camera. And then the bottom one. So I got that one started. That's good. So I get the bottom one started, and then it'll just be a matter of tightening those up. And that's how you change the thermostat. Okay, so I finally got that back one started. It is a tricky little guy, and you have to be patient. So I'll show you how I turn it. It's like small little turns. So yeah, you have to be patient with this one and try and get it started with your fingers or a magnet or whatever else. So I'm not going to make you watch this whole process, but I'll just give you an idea of if you take this one out, it's going to be a little bit tedious to get back in and started. So you got to be patient and just small little quarter turns at a time until you get it back on. Okay? And you'll get some of that when you drop your wrench. Okay, so here's the thermostat from the bottom view, and I'll go ahead and show you how you have to get to this one. This is a very useful tool. You want to grab one of these little guys if you can. It reaches right in there and perfect angle to tighten this bottom screw. Of course, this one out here is easy. This is the first one you want to do. But this one here is another tricky one that this tool makes it very easy to access. Alright? I won't belabor the issue, but just let you see a little bit of what it takes to put that thermostat housing back into place. Next we'll do the water pump itself. Okay, so finally we get to the culprit who started this whole process, the water pump. So I'm going to do the same thing to the water pump that I did to the thermostat housing, and that is I'm going to put super gray RTV silicone gasket maker on the surface of the water pump, on both sides of the gasket, and also on the housing and the engine as well. And I put a very thin coat. As I stated before when I did the thermostat, is you don't want to get squeeze out inside here. So you want to put a really thin coat. You want to put a thin, even coat, okay? See, like so. And as you put it on, you really want to pay attention to making sure you have complete coverage, but at the same time, keeping it away from, the inside and making sure you don't get squeezed out when you tighten it down. Don't put so much excess that you're going to get squeezed out inside your engine block. And you don't have to worry about it. You just put enough to seal and to smooth out little inconsistencies that might cause leaks. And that's what you want to do. You want to put it on a nice thin layer, see, just like that, even. And you don't have to worry about getting silicone in the engine. This is not going to squeeze that big chunk of silicone out and clog up somewhere. It's just not going to do that because it's too thin. Okay. Now the other reason you want to keep it nice and thin is so that your gasket can cut through it. Look at this. This is a good example. If you look at this, it has a black coating on it. That shiny black coating is heat activated. When the engine heats up, this is in contact with metal, it's going to create a bond. And if you tighten it down while it's still wet, it will cut through this silicone, and when it heats up, it will still bond with the metal. Some people say, oh no, it has to be perfectly clean and sterile and all that, and that's kind of true-ish. But the bottom line is, you want to make sure that all the little voids are cleaned up with the silicone so that you don't have a leak in an area where maybe this didn't. The coating is very thin, and it's not going to be forgiving of anything that's maybe a little rough or warped and you couldn't tell that it was warped, or there could be some scuffing on this. Like there was a little bit of scuffing on this. You could sand it out if you want, but it isn't necessary if you put a little bit of this gasket sealer on, because I have never had a leak in doing this 35 years. I have never had a leak ever, once, on any car, truck, vehicle, tractor, in plant, anything I've ever done. I use this technique and it works. And I didn't always use this gray gasket sealer because when I first started, it didn't even exist. They didn't even have this yet. I used some red, something red, I don't know what it was, a long time ago. But the key is to take your time. Don't waste so much time that it dries completely on you. But you want to take your time and make sure cover is complete and is thin, so you don't get squeezed out into the compartment. Then line it up with the holes, put it on, and then do the other side. And I'm going to also do the engine side, nice and thin. Okay, it does not take a lot, and this works. And when we're finished, when I'm finished, I won't have any leaks. You don't have to worry about it. Just tighten it down to the correct torque, which I torque by feel now. I've been doing it so long, I can feel what the gasket is doing. So I don't use the torque spec. I know I've used the torque spec so long, I know what it should feel like. And sometimes the torque spec isn't the best torque because there may be some grit in the threads, or there may be some kind of a resistance, or it may be going very smoothly, and if you feel it give, it's time to stop. Don't keep on going to the torque spec. Stop. So if you're a beginner, it's best for you to continue to just go strictly by the torque spec, but the old timers that may be watching know what I'm talking about, and we do it by feel. For this application, not for head bolts, not for anything like that. You have to go by torque spec for heads and stuff like that. You have to know when to use this little thing of mine. So I'm going to go over to the engine now and put a smear on that, and then we'll install the water pump. Okay, so we're over the car now, and I am going to coat the surface of the engine block with a little bit of sealer, and then I will install the water pump while everything is still nice and tacky. like I said before, you want to put it on nice and thin. It's perfectly fine to put it on the engine block surface directly. The reason they say don't do it is because people do this. They put a big glob like that, and then it squeezes in, and it ends up going into the engine block. So instead of explaining that to people, they just say it's simpler just to tell them don't do it, because people don't listen, they don't follow instructions, they don't remember, they make mistakes, and then they get mad when the car fails and they want to blame somebody else for their mistake, and that costs companies money. So they just say, you don't know what you're doing, you're the average customer, and we're just going to tell you never put it on the engine block. Don't do it. Like there's some magical problem with it, which there is not. And humidity. I have a little teeny bit of water here, preventing me from getting even as cover as I would like. But the key is to keep it thin, keep it clean, keep it as consistent as possible. And that's another reason why I put it on both surfaces. So little areas where I may have missed on here, I will have it on my gasket. Alright, so now let's get a few of these nuts, these bolts. And you have to remember that they weren't all the same length. So there were two longer ones, here and here. So it might be a good idea to put those in first, so that you don't get any of the smaller, shorter screws in the wrong location. That went on nice. Nice. And I should have known better than that. And then we just put one of these long ones in here, long one in here, like that, to hold it, and a long one across from it, over here. Screw that down. Get it started. Go in like this. Get this side started. And then put in all the little short ones. I won't make you suffer through that, but that's basically how you do it. Then, once I finish putting all the screws in, I'll put on the hose clamp, and that'll be the water pump. Okay, the water pump is all installed. A couple of mistakes I made. What you want to do, order of operations, is there's a little bracket that holds the hose here. It holds the hose right here. You want to put that on first. There's a little 10mm bolt back there that you want to be able to have access to. So you want to put this little bracket on first. Then this little shield that protects if your serpentine pelt breaks, you want to put this on next. And this is held on by one of the long bolts. So I had to take that bolt back out that I did initially. You have to put these on first. There's 3 of them, one here, here, and here. You want to put those on first. Then put all the rest on, tighten them down, and now we're going to put on the hose. So I'll have to put the camera down like so. You can watch me put on the hose, the discharge hose from the water pump. I think I want my screw down below. Below here. Oh, I got it stuck. Put it down below so I can access it very easily in the future, like so. That's another little important thing you can do is when you take things loose and put them back together, kind of take note and pay attention to the orientation and the way the screws are facing, because it makes it easier or harder the next time you have to do that maintenance. And the water pump is installed. Now all we have to do is put the muffler and the catalytic converter back on, put the bumper back on, put the wheels and tires back on, and go for a drive. Alright, well, I just started it up to bleed some of the air out of the system. I'm going to have the bleeder open. There's no leaks. No leaks. You can see here that the bleeder open. I'm going to let it get up to temperature and let the coolant go down a bit. Burp the air bubbles out. Top it off. And then we're going to put that heat shield on, bumper cover, tires, and then you know what happens when the tires go on. You know exactly what happens after the tires go on. Alright guys, thanks for watching. So this is the top hose clamp on the reservoir that comes up from the water pump. And getting it off is tricky. You really need a special tool to get it off. It's called a, what is it called? A bird.